Hey, welcome back to the Biohacks podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Clare Rodea Ryan, women's wellness expert and consultant. And we're going to be basically delving into the female menstrual cycle and why women should understand how their cycle works and how it affects them on a day-to-day basis. So Clare, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. And yeah, I think it's brave of you to be talking about this, and I think it's important.
100%. We need to spread the word and spread enlightenment. So before we get into the episode, guys, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Obviously, really helps us with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like today's episode, hit the like button and also hit subscribe for us. So, Clare, do you want to tell us a bit about how you got to where you are today? And you told me the 3 disciplines that you're working on at the start. So maybe you want to kind of go into that a little bit as well.
Okay, great. So I'm a yoga teacher. That's where my wellness journey started. And I've been teaching for about 13, 14 years around London. I started honing in on sort of women's wellness and doing women's wellness empowerment workshops about 10 years ago in London as well. And then we set up a retreat in Kent called the Clares 3 years ago. And from here, we run lots of different events, but one of them is sisterhood gatherings. And on those gatherings, I do these talks on the 3 subjects, which are sort of my main areas in terms of women's wellness and empowerment.
Yeah.
And that's probably the first place where people come and find me for get introduced to what I teach and also the type of yoga that I teach. So the 3 areas are menstrual cycle awareness, pelvic self-care and pleasure, and the dynamics of the inner feminine and masculine, which actually all kind of flow into the menstrual cycle awareness as well.
Wow, so it all kind of connects together. What kind of led you on the journey from yoga to sisterhood retreat? What was that transition? What happened to make that? Was it just a natural evolve?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it was quite a long journey in terms of sisterhood gatherings came out of just wanting to connect with women and bringing women together into a safe container where they could be themselves. I think women always are having to play lots of different roles, like within their work, within their family life, and within society as well. And so I wanted to provide a safe space where women could just be themselves and kind of share their experiences of womanhood in a place that's like non-judgmental and very open. And also learn about education that they hadn't had. So a lot of women have missed out on education that's really useful to them. You know, like we have pretty much 0 education about menstrual cycle awareness, 100%. Apart from you could get pregnant and all the reproductive stuff about conceiving or not conceiving. And so my journey started personally from just experiencing really bad period pains, so much so that I would have to let people down. So when I was teaching classes, I'd have to let people down. I just got really fed up with it. So it also was at a time in my life, in my sort of mid to late 20s, when I was thinking about conceiving. So I decided I'm going to start learning about my womb, 100%. Like why I'm getting this much pain. I also had a lot of PMT, so I'd get like frustrated and angry during certain times of the month. And I didn't like that either. So yeah, I wanted to learn more about what was going on. So that's when I started learning and educating myself and then wanting to share.
That's really bizarre, isn't it? Like when you think about our schooling and like the science, math, like, but then there's this whole practical being a human part that we actually, no one ever like educates you about it. Maybe if your parents are obviously kind of slightly aware or slightly conscious of it, but it does seem now when you put it in that context, it's like biological processes that we all have to experience and have to kind of deal with on a daily basis. Like we don't get that education on, I guess, and I guess that's the really key part. It's like what you said. So,
and it causes so many problems not having that education. Like it decreases a woman's self-esteem, their confidence, they question themselves, like why they're feeling bad, why they're low energy, why they're feeling anxious. Like it all falls into mental health as well. And a lot of the doctors that we go to when we have some of these problems, they don't even ask us about our menstrual cycle, because a lot of the medical system as well is all based around the men's hormonal cycle, which is a 24-hour cycle. whereas a woman's is a 24 to 32 day hormonal cycle. Were very different, but yet the medical makeup is based on a men's. So when we go and try and get professional support, you know, it's not there, it's not focused on our human experience as a woman. So I feel like it's also a shame that we're not empowered in our own way, because often women are given drugs or put on the pill. You know, they're told to moderate their body to fit in with society on a level that's not our natural way of being, our natural cycle, if that makes sense.
I guess, and it's the same with anything, isn't it? It's like, if you don't truly if you're not educated on something, then you naturally fear it. And then I guess then you have fear of judgment if you bring it up, or like you don't know where to turn. And I guess it's like this awareness, like the message that you're spreading is about awareness, and that there is, like, from where people potentially have been uncertain in the past, there is education. There are things, practical things that you can do on a daily basis, educating yourself, and practical exercises, routines, whatever, that really empower the individual and empower the individual to take control of their bodies, which is like a human, like it seems like a human right, doesn't it? Like,
and I think that's so true, and it really impacts like our lifestyle choices. So if we knew how our energy levels went through the whole month, how our emotions would change, if we had a map to tell us, you know, this is what you're going to be feeling at each point during the month, then we could style our lifestyle choices, our exercise plan, our nutritional plan, even the way that we communicate within our relationships. You know, we'll communicate very differently through that whole month.
Definitely.
If we have a map, it's so much easier to make choices for ourselves that are aligned with our well-being on a mental and physical and spiritual level.
I love the map analogy. It's so good, because you're here today, we're all here in our own skin in this moment, and we're all aiming to get to somewhere. And whether that's in relationship, health, money, any of these domains, it's kind of like you're here now, but then you need to kind of know, you need the awareness to know where you want to go. And I really love that analogy of the map to kind of help take people, women or men, on a journey from where you are now to where you want to get to. So no, that's really really insightful. No, that's great. So maybe should we delve into let's just delve into it. So what are the main problems that you see that people will come to you with symptoms, or how, like, do you want to delve into some of the problem side of the equation?
So a lot of women that I've worked with, and the stories that I hear from my sisterhood gatherings or on my mentorships, is that either women are going through overwhelm, high anxiety, phases of high anxiety. They can be burning out quite regularly. Perhaps they've been on the pill for a really long time, and they're thinking about naturalizing, like coming off the pill and having a natural cycle. And I also want to say it's everyone's choice to be on the pill, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but
different people respond.
It is a great thing also to come off and find out what's going on with your body without these hormones that are man-made. They're synthetic hormones in these pills.
Sorry, when you said overwhelm, what's overwhelm?
Overwhelm is like loading too much on your plate. So women tend to have this thing about people pleasing. They're not necessarily in their bodies and what is right for them. So they tend to, at points during their cycle, overgive, and that's when they can get overwhelmed, and like multitasking,
burnout. And I guess so all those things you said there, they all sound like they're quite connected.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to give you some tips at the end how not to burn out, which is really key, especially if you're doing fitness as well. I mean, it impacts all types of work, whatever you're doing, whether it's like your fitness or the work. But I'll give those tips at the end.
No, definitely.
Other reasons are like painful periods and wanting to conceive. Perhaps also some women have absent period, like they just don't happen. It's like their bodies don't allow them to have that release, and they'll just carry on cycling without having that release.
Would you say that's like linked to, obviously I guess this is kind of, we're talking about the individual components here, but I guess like that would be linked to stress. Obviously the stress, the psychological stress or that they've kind of that's being created then has these knock-on effects to the actual hormone cycle, and I guess the hormone cycle then has a knock-on effect back to the psychology.
I'm so glad you said that. It's exactly that. Exactly. I think that's what's so empowering, is that the lifestyle choices that we make impact our hormonal balance, and then our hormonal imbalance or balance then affects how we feel within our life. So there is absolutely a feedback loop between the choices that we make and how we lead our lives, and then the balance of our hormones. And obviously some people have natural chemical imbalances, but even then you can make lifestyle choices and lead your life in a certain way that will bring you into harmony as much as possible, because our bodies are always trying to come into harmony, and it's actually sometimes our choices that we make that are the things that knock it out.
Definitely. And I talk about this a lot with health, and the idea of hormesis, that and Aristotle's golden mean, however you want it, kind of it shows up in all different areas of nature, but this idea that the problems always exist in lack or excess, and they normally turn up at the extremes, don't they? And I guess we're all naturally extreme, we're deficient, or we have too much of something, I guess, in particular areas. And it's kind of like not having that judgment about recognizing and having the awareness to know what your particular symptoms are, and then that, first of all, having that awareness, and then also then too having the education or the map like you've described to be able to do something about it. I think, what would you say about the awareness? Like, do you get, because a lot of people, I guess, they get a very visceral awareness that I've got these symptoms, I've got burnout, I've got anxiety. So like, I guess people feel it on a visceral level, and I guess it's your job is then to take that and help them understand
and look at the why. And you can look at the map, and you can look at the map of your cycle and have a look at where those pain points are in your cycle. So like where you feel overwhelmed or where you feel anxious, and there's always a link to what you're doing somewhere else in the cycle as to why that imbalance is created later on, basically. So we just kind of analyze where these points are, pain points in their cycle, to then have a look at the whole cycle as a whole, and have a look like, okay, how are you leading your life at this point, this point, this point during your cycle? And then we establish where the imbalances are. We rebalance that point, and then they find these pain points dissolve, literally. And you can actually start enjoying these points in your cycle that used to be really challenging. You can actually start enjoying them, because there's amazing gifts in each part. Like there's one part that's great for organizing, refining. There's one point that's good for getting out there and being seen and being visible and socializing, and there's another point that's really good for like being creative and fun and playful. And then there's another point where you're like grounding, you're like just like coming back into yourself, like getting in touch with yourself, and just more stillness, to then kind of come back into the cycle again. So it is amazing, and I love it. And a lot of partners have practiced going in tune with their female partners, because it's quite a good guide, for a month, how if you live sustainably within your own hormonal cycle as a woman, it has a really great impact on those around you, because they kind of come into flow with your sustainable life practice, basically.
I guess it's really, no, it's great. You can keep listening to you talk. It's great. It sounds like, and I guess that what's a really interesting point there is that once you come in anxious, overreached, then you have the conversation, you speak to you, and it helps to give that person a sense of control back, because once you have that understanding, I guess then you can then start, exactly like you said, you can actually start to enjoy it, because you actually understand, gives you a sense of control, and you know why these things are happening to you, and you're kind of empowering that person to kind of take back control and be aware of, I guess, why this is happening, and actually how to embrace it, and how to roll with it, type of thing, I guess.
Exactly. I think so. My 3 key principles really is education first, kind of like shine that light on this thing that we don't really know about. We're only really aware of it when we bleed, or when we've got PMT or something's going wrong, that's the only time that we're aware of it or someone else is aware of it. But by shining a light on the whole map, it's like suddenly people are like, whoa, there's like so much more to a menstrual cycle than just those, you know, annoying areas, you know, like it's, some women just feel like it's a hassle that you know, that you during our period and you have to like carry on, it's just a hassle, it just gets in the way of living and life.
And I guess some of that's to do with judgment, isn't it? It's to do with self-judgment. And would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's, so there's a lot of deep feelings that come with this. There's shame, a lot of shame. There's also like, we get a lot of girls sadly get brought up being told that the menstrual cycle is a curse, and even I was. So we get told,
it's kind of cultural, isn't it? I guess some of it's cultural. And
yeah, and you know, still in a lot of cultures, women are locked away, you know, or they're not allowed to enter spiritual venues or occasions if they're bleeding. So still, it's such a huge thing, and obviously every woman has it every month, and you know, so yeah, there's a lot of deep underlying feelings from a cultural level why women don't have the proper education and why we're not seeking it as well.
100%.
You know, like it gets hidden. And I think there's some women obviously that don't experience any pain points at all. They don't have pain, they don't have PMT, they just like flow. And it's just like, you know, if some of these women were like, how do you do that? But it's because they don't experience any pain points with it. And so they also then don't look deeper into what's going on in their cycle either. And I think they might be missing out on something, even if they're not experiencing any pain points. They're missing out on capitalizing in a way on certain areas of their cycle, and also really inviting those times in for rest, because there's really key areas within the cycle when you should be resting, and if you don't rest, you deplete like iron, and essential nutrients. So there's times when we do need to allow ourselves to rest. I think women find it hard to give themselves permission to rest.
Definitely. So those are the pain points. We've kind of delved a little bit there. Do you want to maybe run through about the cycle, like because you mentioned kind of 4 quadrants: playful, centering. There were 2 more. Do you want to just give just a little bit more?
Yeah. So the easiest language to use, and in fact I've got a clock on my wall, there's like a menstrual cycle clock that you can get.
Perfect.
And it's really good for me, but it's also good for my partner because he can understand where I am, and it's a really easy language. It's we liken it to the 4 seasons.
Yeah, perfect.
So it's like winter, spring, summer, autumn. You can also liken the cycle to the phases of the moon. It's exactly the same, and also the life cycle of a woman. So these are more in-depth kind of subjects. So I'm just going to focus on the inner seasons,
right? Because
it's a language that we all understand, because in the north and southern hemisphere we both go through these seasons. So the first one would be winter, which is day 1 to 6 or 7 of a lady's menstrual cycle when they're bleeding.
Yep.
And this is when they want to go into hibernation. This is when their awareness is starting to draw inwards. They become more aware of themselves. Their sort of the light turns on inside, and there's less of a light outside, if that 100%. Makes sense. So their awareness is really inwards. So this is when they should be resting and recuperating, recharging, not doing much, having other people cook for them, like having all the food prepped so they're not having to do too much, and just taking some time out. Sometimes I call it women's holiday. You know, it should be that women's holiday. It's their moon time. Winter. And then spring is from day 6, 7 to about 12, 14. And springtime is obviously a delicious time because life is starting to come back. But it's also a time when our hormone levels aren't supporting lots of activity at this time. So like estrogen is still quite low, progesterone is still quite low. And often at this time, I'm one of them, that I want to like race out of the block like a horse. You know, as soon as like the winter is over, I'm like, I want to be out in life, you know, getting back out there. You know, winter slowed me down. And But the problem with that is that you burn out like halfway through spring and into summer, and my energy's dropped. So I've learned
the support because you're still coming out of winter, because these things aren't on off switches, are they? They're biological processes, and I guess they take time, in waves rather than bar chart up and down. It's a wave.
Exactly. It's not like, right, that's my area done, now I'm into this. It's sort of like there's transitional phases. Just as like, I really love this analogy that in the spring you get these buds that come up too soon and they die away because of the winter frost is still there in the mornings. 100%. So it's sort of like that. So I always think like spring is not a race. It's, you have to pace yourself in spring. And you can start to build up that pace because you feel your energy building as estrogen starts to rise. So you then exercise changes, you know, you start feeling like more physical exercise and pushing yourself a little bit more. And then we have the summer phase, which is the ovulatory phase. And this is between day 12 to 16, 17. And this is when everything is peaking, like estrogen is peaking. And we also get a little blip of testosterone, lucky us, because it really makes a difference having testosterone. And now I realize like why in ovulation, you know, I've got so much more energy to get out there because testosterone really helps. So like, but we don't have much of it. We just have this little lift in our ovulatory period, and obviously it's because it's a time when the body is thinking, oh, maybe we might be conceiving here, so we'll give you a little boost of energy and make you look more radiant and shiny. But this is a time when we could be burning out just because we've been racing during spring. But summer is a time just to breeze it, you know, you're kind of in your flow. If you're doing fitness and exercise, you're in your zone. It's, you know, it's good time. Not that you can't be in your zone the rest of the time, you definitely can, but you need to optimize all these different phases and be aware like, oh, I'm in this phase, this is how I optimize in this phase. So it's not, you're not in your summer and you're doing a race or something. If you're competing,
be aware.
Don't think, just be aware, and you can still absolutely optimize where you are. I think it's probably more difficult obviously in winter, but definitely spring, summer, autumn, if you play it right, you can optimize your
and I guess if you've got a certain amount of reserve, say for example, and this is, I'm talking about on like a sporting level, I guess it's like you just be aware that during those periods, like you don't do the extra training session, you save your reserve, you only have a certain amount of energy and time, so you save those up for the real key periods that you the
exactly
key time that you need them, maybe. I guess that's,
and you focus on another part of your wellness during that time that's going to support you. You know, like a lot of football, rugby teams are now doing yoga and meditation, you know, so you kind of think like, oh, that's just as important as the fasting,
it adds
the actual
taking away.
Yeah,
definitely.
And then we go into the autumn phase. Now this has got a lot of bad rep, the autumn phase. It's like the PMT phase. Men know about this phase as well because they're very affected by women having PMT, and they often sort of back off, rightly so, because a woman can be in a place of frustration. So I see autumn as a place when the height of summer has gone. Everything is stripped right back, like the sea has receded and there's like wrecks there. You can suddenly see all the wrecks. So when the summer's, it's high tide, you can't see anything. When it's out, all the wrecks are there. And this is like the wrecks of perhaps in your springtime you've been over planning, you've put yourself up to too much, and you've created too much stuff for yourself, and now you can't deal with it all. And maybe you haven't been speaking your truth, your needs, your wants, and suddenly it's like it's all there and it's too much and it's overwhelming. So you come out with frustration, blame, all these kind of things. So a woman absolutely needs to like know what her needs are during this time. And it is a time for slowing down as well. It's really hard because it's all biological. So the estrogen and progesterone, estrogen has dropped, testosterone has dropped. Like literally, it's like on a ride, it just goes like that. It's like the biggest drop. So we just fall off a cliff. And it's, so for some women, it can be like, what just happened to me? Yesterday, I was on my game, I was flying. Today, I'm like clumsy, or, you know, I'm just tired, I'm feeling rubbish, you know, and it's frustrating. Yeah. And the crash is more stark if you're living more starkly. You know, if you're trying to find sustainability, it will happen, but you'll be aware. So you'll be like,
Definitely.
It won't feel so bad. So the autumn time, I see it as being, once you've managed to solve these issues in the life choices that you're making, the autumn actually becomes really beautiful. You know, it's like a really colourful time. It's actually one of my favourite seasons. I have more clarity. It's like a time for refining. I know who I am. I know myself much more in this season.
Is it more reflective? Is that not the right word?
You do begin to become a bit more reflective later on. The autumn's the biggest season. It's like the long season. So it's like day 18 to 29 or 35, some people, depending on how long. So it's a really long season.
Yeah.
So even within the autumn, there's kind of different patches that you'll go through, which is quite interesting. And during the end of autumn, you get this rise in estrogen again. And so that's a really good time for exercise, which helps to combat any sort of sluggishness or congestion that you might get during your winter hibernation time. So that rise in estrogen is really good to kind of move and get everything moving so that it decreases pain and any congestion that might happen during winter. Interestingly, I looked up a case study about amino acids dropping in autumn phase.
I can imagine.
So that could be a little thing to try out.
I can imagine. Yeah, no, definitely.
But yeah, so yeah, and then we're back into winter. And I think some women find it really hard at the end of autumn to start letting go, because this is a time when you're shedding your leaves and you're having to let go of everything that you've reaped, everything that you've grown and nurtured. You kind of momentarily have to let go for 4 or 5 days, and you have to trust that you can pick everything up the other side when you come into spring. And for a lot of women, that time is quite challenging, because as I said, our awareness starts really going inwards.
Wow.
And we can fight it, and that can cause problems then going into our winter. So yeah, that was quite an in-depth
super
introduction.
No, it's really good. And what you've done is, like, by speaking in metaphor, it really helps to attach this, what you'd see on a chart would be 1 to 6, 6 to 40. Like, you just see these numbers, whereas you put it into something that people can understand, and it attaches, and you can kind of really visualize it, and it's obviously makes it easier for people to remember. So that's really
yeah, definitely. I'm developing a map now, and that will be out soon, and it will be like a freebie download that people can have, and I'll be having a video linked with that to educate people how to chart their cycle.
Make sure we stick that in the description section.
Yeah,
we can get things on. So that's super insightful. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing it in such a helpful and easy to understand way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we've kind of looked at the problem, we've looked at kind of understanding the cycle. Maybe just before, because I don't want to take too much more of your time, leave people with maybe kind of like 3 tips, like power of 3, 3 tips to kind of help people kind of make good choices. Like, what kind of things would you suggest them to be doing?
Yeah, great. So my first one would be, in the winter phase, is to rest and take iron supplements.
Okay.
Really, really key. To rest, take iron supplements in winter, and try not to do too much. Try and dissolve as many responsibilities as you can for that month. You know, pass things off, delegate as much as you can, and have food ready, everything that you need ready. Sort of gather in your autumn so that in the winter you can rest. You have everything that you need to hand. And being around loved ones, it's a really nice time to be around familiar ones, and in a comfortable setting. And then for second one, I'd say it's spring, is to not race. Remember that, like, that horse on the blocks ready to go. Just like feel into that feeling and don't run with that feeling. Just like be aware of that feeling that you're wanting to like charge out of the starting blocks, and just take a moment to breathe, and then kind of one foot in front of the other. I always think about that. I always think about one foot in front of the other, going out slowly. So that would be my spring tip.
Just on that, actually, and some of the guys that probably might be listening to this, like the sprint coaches we've had on, they talk about this idea, and it's kind of mixes in well that you, in a sprint race, you don't want to race out from the beginning. It needs to be controlled from the beginning, because if you race out at the beginning, you don't set yourself up for the rest of the race. Yeah, exactly. So you kind of you put yourself in a bad position for the rest of the race. And they talk about this orchestra and building the rhythm as you kind of accelerate, and building.
Love that.
You kind of go from 100 meters, you kind of build the intensity as you go along, rather than going from 0 to 100 and then crashing. So it's just as you said,
good.
Kind of literally, they talk about this orchestra, bringing it all together for the final finale. So it had
That's so good. I think this seasonal map can map onto anything. Like, there's obviously a seasonal map within, like racing, because summer would be like the height, the winning.
Yeah.
And then you go into the autumn and the winter because you need to recuperate afterwards. Yeah. And it also is like your day. Yep. At the beginning of the day, you got spring, so go slowly, don't race out of bed, just like walk, so I think this map is so great. It fits onto so many things.
Yeah, nature, I guess, isn't it? Right.
Nature, exactly. All rule apart, as above, so below.
What was number 3?
The third one is, charting your cycle, getting to know where you are in your cycle, starting to be interested, be aware. The best way is definitely to chart, old school, paper, pen, and as I say, it's good to have these maps. There are free ones out there as well, otherwise you can download mine. There's apps that you can use, like Hormonology is great. Fitter is really great for women in sports. They have like recipes on there for different times in your cycle, so that's Fitter. And
is it Daisy? Do you know Daisy? Is that a similar one?
Oh, I don't know who the name of who runs it.
That's one I've seen. Yeah, that's one I've seen around.
That's cool. And then there's Flow. Those are the 3 key ones that I use. Those apps, I'm on all of them because they all offer different things.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool.
And then I also just chart.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, maybe starting out, you chart, and if you measure, you can manage, right? So you have to know where you are to go to somewhere else. And I guess it's quite nice to be old school to begin with. And I guess then obviously now you've got all this fit tech and health tech that is putting it all into a algorithmic format for us.
Exactly. As well. And whilst that is really good, it's still in a way stereotyping a woman's experience. So it is really good because it's scientifically proven with the nutrition. It's based on the hormonal fluctuations, but then in terms of how a woman personally experiences it in her life, that's why charting your own cycle comes in really, really well, because that's really where the changes can be made, because you'll start to see where the imbalances are in your life choices and lifestyle.
Fantastic. Super valuable, really valuable information in there. Claire, if people want to find out more about you, about the work you do, where can they get hold of you?
So the best place at the moment is actually on Instagram. So at Clare Rodea.
We'll put links below for anybody.
Links below. And the Quaves as well. So you can head to thequaves.com for our sisterhood gatherings if you're interested in that. But at the moment, Instagram's going to be the best place, because that's where I put what I'm doing, what I'm offering. You've got all the information about how to contact me on there.
Definitely. Great. Claire, I really appreciate you coming on. We'll have to get you back on and talk about, you've got a few different topics I kind of want to go into. I'm super curious now, so we'll have to get you back on again.
Cool. I'd love that. Thank you so much for having me.
Really appreciate it, Claire, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.